Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into a question that, well, it touches something deep in pretty much everyone, doesn't it?
Mm.
Is God really listening to our prayers, our thoughts, those quiet hopes, maybe the not-so-quiet anxieties we kind of send out there?
Yeah, it's definitely a universal human thing, wondering if
That-
those intentions actually land anywhere.
Exactly. It's a question that just echoes, really, across different cultures, different beliefs.
It really does.
Yeah,
And clearly, it's something our listener here has thought about a lot based on the material shared.
right.
So we're going to, take a closer look. Why does it sometimes feel like we're just talking to ourselves?
Yeah,
And explore some of the ways these sources suggest God might respond, and ultimately how faith itself kind of shapes our view on this whole big question.
precisely.
Yeah.
So if you're wondering about this, well, that's why we're here, this deep dive. It's really about exploring that very personal side of belief divine communication. We'll look at why those moments of silence can feel so heavy. We'll delve into the ways a response might actually be happening, maybe in ways we don't immediately see,
Yeah, the subtle ways.
and really unpack what your sources say about faith's role in all this. We're hoping to, shed some light on the beauty and, yeah, the mystery of believing in a God who hears.
And it's important, I think, as we go through these sources, we're not aiming for like definitive scientific proof here.
Right.
It's more about getting a richer understanding of this really fundamental part of the human spiritual experience as it's reflected in the material provided.
Okay, let's get into it then. Prayer. It's such a basic human thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Whether it's, a formal prayer in church or temple or a song or even just that silent wish you hold inside, it's this way we have of reaching out.
Yeah. The sources you shared definitely touch on that universality, this deep need to connect with something bigger than us. It's like a language spoken in countless ways, isn't it? Expressing gratitude, need, everything in between. It's core to being human. This impulse to talk to the divine.
But then, and I'm sure you've felt this,
Yeah.
and it's definitely in the reflections sent to us, there's the really hard part,
Mm-hmm.
that feeling when you've poured your heart out. Like Sarah in one example, praying so hard for her mother's recovery, night after night, asking for healing.
Right.
And nothing seems to change from her viewpoint, at least.
That experience Sarah's as described there is just so relatable, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we put so much hope, so much emotional energy into praying, and we don't see the result we desperately want right away, it's just human to feel that disconnect.
Really.
It raises that big question, is anyone even listening? Your sources really get into the vulnerability of those moments.
And it's right there in that silence, as the sources
Yeah.
point out, that frustration and, well, doubt can really start to grow.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel alone, like your words are just echoing back. You start questioning everything, your faith, what you believe in. Is there anyone there?
That feeling of isolation, that's a key thing several of your sources explore. It can be a really lonely, disheartening place when prayers feel unheard.
Definitely.
It challenges the belief in a caring, responsive God. And as some readings suggest, it forces us to wrestle with the uncertainty that just comes with faith.
Okay, so let's really dig into this based on your sources. Why does it feel like that sometimes? This silence. What are some reasons we might feel God isn't listening, according to this material?
Well, one of the main things your sources bring up is the gap between our expectations and maybe the reality of how divine communication works.
Ah,
We often go into prayer with a very specific result in mind, right? A
Yeah.
clear fix for a problem or getting something we want. Praying for a promotion means expecting a yes. Praying for healing means looking for immediate improvement.
right. We map it all out in our heads how it should go. But as several sources discuss, what if that's just not how it operates?
Exactly.
What if the answer isn't the one we scripted? What if it's no, or maybe not yet, or even something totally different we hadn't even thought of?
Precisely. There's that example from your collection, remember? Someone praying hard for a specific promotion
Yeah.
who ends up finding a completely different career path that actually brings them way more satisfaction and like deep fulfillment.
Hmm.
It really shows that maybe divine help, or whatever term we use, doesn't always match our idea of what we need right now or what's best long term.
It's kind of like we're ordering from a cosmic menu with very specific requests.
Right.
And we get something slightly different, but maybe, as the sources suggest, it's actually more nourishing in ways we couldn't have guessed.
Yeah, it's about broadening our view of what an answer even looks like.
Makes sense.
And another key idea that comes up in the readings is divine timing.
Oh, yeah.
That one.
As humans, we're pretty immediate, aren't we? We want quick fixes, instant solutions.
Totally. Impatient. But this concept of divine timing, as explored in your sources, often works on a much bigger, almost, well, incomprehensible timescale to us.
Right. We're tapping our feet, checking our watch, spiritually speaking,
Uh,
while maybe things are unfolding at a pace we just can't grasp. That example you share, the person praying for financial help for years
hmm
and them finding purpose in teaching, it resonates with that. The answer wasn't instant cash, but it came eventually tied to something deeper than just money.
And what's insightful there, as some sources point out, is that the answer might not just be about the immediate request. It
Right.
might be part of a much larger journey, a longer story of personal spiritual growth. It requires a different kind of patience, doesn't it?
Yeah, a deep trust that things will work out in their own time, even if that time frame is way beyond what we understand.
Exactly.
And it's not always going to be some like huge dramatic moment, right? A booming voice or a burning bush kind of thing.
Uh-huh. Probably not, no.
Several sources mention the nature of the communication itself. We might expect that big sign, but the material suggests it's often way more subtle.
That's a key point. It's rarely this grand, unmistakable announcement. As your sources suggest, it might show up as a quiet feeling of peace,
Hmm.
or a weird coincidence that gives you guidance, or even just the right words from someone else at the right time. It means we have to be more tuned in.
Right. So if we're waiting for the angels to sing, as one source jokes,
Yeah.
we might miss that gentle nudge, that gut feeling, or the timely advice from a friend that is the response we were looking for. It asks for a different kind of listening, a deeper awareness.
Which leads to maybe a trickier idea when several sources explore it. Sometimes the silence itself, the prayer that feels unanswered, that can be a form of communication, an opportunity for growth through struggle.
Okay, let's unpack that because, as some sources admit, the idea of silence being an answer can be tough to swallow. How does that work, according to this material?
Well, the suggestion is that getting through those periods where we feel unheard can actually build resilience in us.
Okay.
It can make us more empathetic to others going through hard times. And ultimately, some readings argue it can lead to a deeper, more mature faith. Think about that example of someone dealing with deep grief,
Yeah.
feeling totally abandoned in their prayers, but then later realizing the immense inner strength and compassion they actually developed during that dark time.
So it's like the struggle itself shapes us even if we don't get the immediate fix we wanted.
Exactly.
It's about the internal change, the qualities we build, the insights we gain in the silence, even if the original request isn't granted how we pictured it. That's a really powerful perspective in some of these sources.
It really is. It shifts the focus from just getting what we ask for to the deeper transformation that can happen during those times of perceived divine quiet. It pushes us to look inward.
All right, so if God is listening, as the faith expressed in your sources suggests, how does that communication happen? We've talked about why it might feel silent, but let's look at the channels, the ways people experience this connection based on what you've gathered.
Well, one of the most personal ways, highlighted often, is through individual experiences, subjective moments.
Okay.
Those unexpected times people feel genuinely guided or protected, like a sudden gut feeling to do something different that avoids a problem,
Wes.
or just an inexplicable wave of calm in the middle of chaos, or even a vivid dream that offers clarity.
Like Maria's story you shared. Feeling lost in a new city, having this strong urge to turn down a specific street,
Yeah.
and it leads her right to someone who could help. Those moments feel so
Mm.
significant, more than just chance.
Exactly. These really personal experiences often seem to defy simple logic, leaving people with a powerful sense of, something higher at work. They become these important touchstones of faith, moments where that connection felt undeniably real, as many sources describe.
Then there's the whole role of Scripture and teachings, the sacred texts, the wisdom passed down. For many, including views in your sources, this is seen as a very direct line to divine guidance.
Definitely. And what's interesting in your sources is how these ancient texts still speak so clearly to our modern problems and questions.
Yeah.
A verse from the Bible, a passage from the Quran, teachings from the Bhagavad Gita, wisdom from spiritual leaders. These words can offer comfort, direction, a real sense of connection to a larger spiritual story. They're like a living bridge for so many people.
It's like finding this timeless wisdom that speaks right to your situation right now. It feels personal, even though it's part of this huge ancient tradition.
And we definitely can't ignore spiritual practices themselves, which come up a lot in your sources. Things like meditation, contemplative prayer, repeating sacred phrases.
Mantras and stuff.
Yeah, they create a kind of space, a stillness where that inner voice or sense of presence might become easier to notice.
Right. It's about deliberately quieting the outside noise, the mental chatter, to try and tune into something deeper. That repetition, whether it's a mantra or a traditional prayer, can really focus the mind, open you up.
It fosters mindfulness, receptivity, makes us more open to those subtle nudges we talked about. It's about actively creating the inner conditions to receive communication.
And sometimes, as several sources point out, the message doesn't come directly at all, but through other people.
Ah, yes.
The idea that God can speak through a friend's kindness, a mentor's wisdom, even a chance encounter or a casual comment.
This really emphasizes how connected we all are, a theme in many of your sources. A simple act of kindness when you really need it, a friend's support, even an offhand remark from a colleague
Yeah.
can hit home with surprising meaning and provide guidance. It reminds us to pay attention to our interactions, our relationships.
It's almost like we're all threads in this big tapestry, and
Yeah.
sometimes guidance comes through a totally unexpected thread. That example of the coworker's advice resonating so much with
Yeah.
someone facing a tough career choice.
Exactly.
It really speaks to being open to guidance from anywhere, not just the usual spiritual channels.
Absolutely. It challenges that idea that divine communication is only a direct one-on-one thing. Your sources suggest it often weaves through our relationships and the world around us.
So to make these ideas more concrete, the material you shared has some really compelling personal stories, moments where people felt that guidance very clearly. Let's look at a few.
Okay. James's story, wrestling with that big job relocation,
Right.
is a powerful example. He prayed for clarity, didn't get a direct answer, but then he overhears this totally separate conversation about family stability.
That was it.
And that was it. It gave him the guidance he needed.
What's fascinating there is how indirect it was. Not a voice, not a sign, but this external thing, an overheard chat, hitting his internal struggle just right.
Yeah, it really shows how being open and attentive to just what's happening around you can be key. Then there's Aisha feeling overwhelmed with anxiety during meditation and suddenly feeling this deep calm and having the thought, you are enough. That feels much more internal, right? Peace and clarity coming from within.
Yeah, that story really highlights the power of quiet reflection, making space for those subtler, intuitive messages to come through.
And Michael's story praying for years to reconcile with his estranged brother.
Yeah, that was gotcha.
And then they reconnect unexpectedly at Christmas. That just perfectly illustrates the divine timing aspect, doesn't it? Prayers answered in ways and on timelines we just don't expect.
It's a strong reminder that just because we don't see results now on our schedule doesn't mean nothing's happening.
Right. There's often a bigger picture unfolding that we just can't see yet.
So what seems to run through all these stories, based on your sources, is how unexpected divine communication often is.
Yeah, definitely.
It rarely fits neatly into our boxes of how God should respond. It encourages us to broaden our view, stay open to possibilities we couldn't have predicted.
So, for you, the listener, how can you start to maybe shift your perspective on this? If you often wonder if God is listening, perhaps a more useful question based on this material is, how might God be responding right now in ways I haven't recognized yet?
It's a good shift.
It moves you from just passively waiting for an answer to actively looking for responses in everyday stuff, events, coincidences, interactions.
And the material also talks about trusting the process, right? Even when things are confusing, when the path isn't clear. That feels really important when facing challenges and prayers seem unanswered.
Exactly. Faith in this context is less about having all the answers and more about trusting that things are unfolding as they should, even when it's really hard to see the purpose.
Like the job loss example leading to a better opportunity later.
Precisely. It's about building resilience during setbacks and holding on to the belief that there might be a bigger plan we don't fully get yet.
It also seems to touch on letting go of our need to control everything.
Oh, for sure.
Prayer, seen this way, is less about dictating outcomes and more about surrendering worries, opening ourselves to possibilities beyond our own limited view.
Yeah, viewing prayer as surrender is a really key idea in several sources. It's humbly admitting we don't have all the answers and entrusting our concerns. Releasing that need for control can actually be incredibly freeing, you know?
Uh,
It frees us up to focus on our own actions, our growth, our inner state.
and maybe, as some sources suggest, we need to rethink what prayer even is. Maybe it's not just a wish list,
Right.
but more of a journey of personal and spiritual growth.
Exactly. Every time you pray, whether you feel an immediate answer or get the outcome you wanted or not, you're engaging in a process that shapes you.
How so?
It builds qualities like patience, gratitude for what you do have, empathy for others. The act of seeking connection itself becomes this valuable, transformative part of your growth.
Okay, so at the heart of all this, it really seems, as your sources keep highlighting, is faith itself.
Mm.
This core belief in a God who is present, who is listening, even when the evidence isn't obvious to our senses.
Faith is definitely the bedrock here. It's that belief that goes beyond needing concrete proof.
Yeah,
It embraces the mystery, the parts we can't fully grasp.
yeah.
It's the courage to keep seeking, keep trusting, even when faced with silence or confusion or outcomes we don't like.
And the material shows beautifully, I think, that faith isn't just about big miracles. It's also about learning to see the small, everyday signs of sunset, an unexpected kindness, a moment of joy.
Yeah, cultivating that gratitude for the seemingly ordinary blessings is a powerful way to strengthen that connection.
Right.
It trains us to see the sacred in the mundane, to notice those subtle reminders of a larger presence that are often all around us.
Of course, keeping that faith isn't always easy. Life throws curveballs,
Yeah.
illness, loss, injustice. It's totally natural to question things then.
Absolutely. Hard times definitely test our beliefs. And it's not just okay, but as some sources suggest, it's actually a normal, even healthy part of the journey to wrestle with doubt, ask hard questions.
So doubt isn't failure.
Not at all. The material often reframes it not as a lack of faith, but as part of seeking deeper understanding. Grappling with those big questions can actually strengthen our convictions in the end.
And your sources mention supportive practices for those tough times, right?
Hmm.
Like journaling, talking to trusted people.
Yeah, things like journaling prayers and reflections, reaching out to friends or mentors, or just making time for quiet contemplation.
Hmm.
These can be really important anchors during doubt or turmoil. They help process emotions, gain perspective, and reconnect with that inner sense of the sacred, even when things feel overwhelming.
Ultimately, the insights from this material suggest that believing God is listening can have a really positive, transformative effect on our lives.
Definitely.
It fosters hope, encourages kindness, gives a deeper sense of purpose.
When you genuinely believe your prayers matter, it often motivates you to live more compassionately, more intentionally, maybe feeling your actions are part of a bigger divine plan. And that underlying belief can build real inner resilience, helping you navigate challenges with more strength and grace.
And the act of prayer itself, reaching out, connects us not just to the divine, but to this huge global community of others also seeking connection. It reminds us we're not alone.
That sense of shared experience, being part of this global tapestry of faith, can be incredibly comforting, especially when you feel isolated in your struggles or questions.
So we come back to where we started. Is God really listening? And while maybe there isn't one neat, tidy
Oh,
answer,
no.
this deep dive suggests the journey itself, seeking that connection, exploring the silence and the subtle responses, is incredibly valuable.
It's about opening yourself to the possibility that the divine is always there, maybe not always in dramatic ways, but in the quiet whispers, the unexpected connections, the inner movements that shake us.
So as you, our listener, continue your own journey, maybe consider this. Hold space for both the doubt and the hope.
Mm-hmm.
Trust that your voice, however you express it, is heard in ways you might not always realize immediately. And perhaps, maybe just start actively looking for those more subtle signs of connection in your day-to-day life. How might shifting your attention like that change your own experience of whether you are truly being heard?